Thanks for coming today, sharing your Saturday. I want to update you on the state of Jefferson, but the first thing I want to do is talk to you about responsibility and morality in government, and that's really what we're doing here. We're talking about taking ownership of a problem that we created ourselves, as Terry said. So put aside your preconceived notions about Constitution and government and the proper role of government, and let's see if we can learn from one another. And when I'm finished, I'll answer any question that you have about this. And we've studied this extensively. Steve has done a financial model. It's absolutely excellent. We've researched court cases. I can prove to you everything that I say today. None of this just comes out of my head. I can prove it with either a document I have in my computer, a document that I can pull up on my computer, or a document that I have in my possession right now. So none of the court cases, none of the precedent, none of the jurisdiction, none of the sovereignty, none of the interposition, and none of the nullification. It's all right here, and I can show it to you if you don't think this is correct or you think there's a better way. First of all, I'm a Christian, and so I said a prayer on the way down here that when I open my mouth to you, that the right words come out, so that you'll see that liberty is worth fighting for. And if we don't fight for it, no one will. And Thomas Jefferson said that when vain men gain the highest seats in the land, it is at that time we will need our most experienced patriots. All you gray hairs in the room, all you veterans, all you young people, learn from the gray hair next to you. We need to restore liberty to this country and to this state. And I've got to tell you, from reading the news, I don't think we have all day. I don't think we have a lot of time left. I want to talk to you about law and morality, and I want to talk to you about the conflict between law and morality, because when there's a conflict between the law and morality of the law, people will lose one of two things. They will either lose their morality in the face of law, or they will lose respect for the law. Do we live in a nation of laws, or do we live in a nation where political elites tell you everything that you're going to do and you just do it? And I want to tell you that this is really important. Liberty is important. Liberty first, liberty last, liberty always. Without liberty, nothing you love, nothing you care about, nothing you feel secure in is secure at all. Without liberty, the government can come and take those things anytime they want. And remember, in a socialist government, the government doesn't necessarily own everything. Ownership isn't the main thing. Control is the main thing. So in your property, where you live right now, at your house, do you own that property? Not really. You're paying rent on it, aren't you? And you're going to pay rent for the rest of your life. And if you fail to pay that rent for 5 years in a row, that property's gone, isn't it? So you don't own your property. Benjamin Franklin said that unless property is secure, liberty cannot exist. Why not? Because you have no place to retreat. You have no safe haven if you can't count on the things you own to make a living for yourself and your family, to convey your family back and forth to work. Do you know the California Department of Motor Vehicles can go in your bank account and take money without your knowledge? And the bank will give it to them, because the California Department of Justice says about the Department of Motor Vehicles, what's yours is theirs. And they can take your property without due process if you forget to pay a registration or if you make a mistake on a check. So do we live in a nation of law? Or do we live in a nation and a state where political elites tell you exactly what's going to happen, and that is what's happening? That's where we live now. We live in a tyrannical government. Liberty is a precious commodity. It's something that Lincoln on the field at Gettysburg said that the men there gave their last full measure to support liberty. Joshua Chamberlain said that they did this for a generation they do not know and a generation that knows them not. So men sacrificed their liberty for you, and they didn't even know who you were. What will we do here? What are we going to do when we see liberty going away? What are we going to be willing to sacrifice for liberty and for Constitution? Because what is the difference between morality and government? What is the difference? Liberty is the difference. Government has no morality. Government is simply power exercised, and it's exercised mindlessly. Mindlessly in the pursuit of gaining more. All organisms have one purpose in the universe, and that's to gain more. Get bigger, get stronger. Government is just another organism. And they lack the morality because they're an inanimate object. They lack the morality to be sure to preserve your liberty along the way. Whose job is that? Is it government's job to preserve your liberty? No, it's your job. Because liberty has a price, doesn't it? Eternal vigilance. And when we stop paying attention, we have closed the only window that we would have looked through to see whether government was performing its proper function and doing its job, and doing it lawfully and legally, and in pursuit of the maintenance of your liberty. Because why do we have government? What is the purpose of government? To secure the rights of the governed, period. Governments were instituted among men to secure the rights of the governed. That's it. So if government fails to secure your liberty, what good is it? Why do we need a government? In fact, why did we institute a government to begin with? Were we a nation that had government just waiting for people to be subjugated? No. As Terry said, we created government, and we did so with a purpose. Why do we have a constitution in California? Who cares? What do we need it for? Well, we go back to a couple of court principles to find the answer to that. One court principle is called the meeting of the minds. And that's where when a contract is formed and there's some dispute, the court orders the parties who are in the dispute to take the contract and go back and see if they can find the letters, the notes, the meetings, audio recordings, video, copy of any letters back and forth, to see what the original authors of the contract intended for that contract to accomplish and how they intended it to accomplish that. Well, we're lucky here. We have all of that. We have all the notes. I've got the notes from the 1879 California Constitution, the 1848 constitutional notes, the working diagrams, all of the old articles, and so on and so forth. We have the letters between the participants. The same with the United States Constitution. We have every bit of that. We know exactly what they thought, exactly what they meant, and exactly what they wanted. There is no doubt whatsoever about the original intent of the framers of the Constitution of California or the Constitution of the United States. Why do we have a Constitution in California? Let's go to the meeting of the minds. We the people, this is the preamble to the Constitution of California. We the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure and perpetuate its blessings, do establish this Constitution. Why do we have government in California? To secure liberty. Who do we need to secure liberty from? The Mexican War was over. The nation of Mexico had gone away. The United States was firmly in control. Admiral Sloat was down in Monterey Harbor with the biggest boat the Navy had. Some guys from Sacramento came down, formed a republic. Later on, they reported to Monterey, and everybody decided we were going to be a state. Well, why on earth would we want to be a state? We had everything our own way already. We formed a state in order to stand between us and the next biggest fish on the block, right, in the pond. We formed a state because we needed a collective voice. As a group of individuals, we did not have the collective power to stop invasion or interference in our affairs and our daily life and our liberty from other places. What other place would that be? The Russians were gone, the English were gone, Mexican government was gone. Well, it was from the federal government. We needed a state, we needed an entity powerful enough with common voice enough to preserve our liberty from any encroachment and overreach by the federal government. And so we used the jurisdiction that we had as people to form a sovereign state, and every state that's formed has a piece of legislation called an enabling act. That's how states are formed in federal legislature. I have the enabling act for the state of California. And it says in it that when we are formed as a state, that we are admitted to the union, to the national stage with all of the other states, and we enjoy equal sovereignty with the original 13. This is very important. This is in the rule book. This is the federal rule book. This is the contract that formed the United States of America. Why do we have a Constitution in the United States of America? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. So we have this Constitution because the Articles of Confederation didn't work that well. So we wrote a new contract. These are the rules. And guess what? These rules do not bind people. There isn't one rule in this book that binds you. Every single rule in this book binds government. Every single one. Now this is kind of interesting because liberty being as important as it is, we have a problem here, and that is education. In 1997, the Center for Constitutional Studies did a survey. And in that survey, 84% of the people said that it was important for government to work as it was intended to, and in order for government to work, people had to be involved. 84% of the people agreed with that. 75% said that the Constitution of the United States was important to them in their everyday life. In their everyday life. Now, in that same survey, 41% of the people could not name all three branches of government. In fact, didn't know there were three branches. 62% of the people couldn't name all three. And 33% couldn't name any of the branches of government. Now, in that same survey, 71% of teenagers did not know that "we the people" were the first three words in the Constitution of the United States. 71%. Education. We have failed to educate young people as to their duties and responsibilities with regard to liberty. They don't know the rules. I've taken the oath of office 3 times now in my life. I take it very seriously. I swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and of the state of California against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. I've read this. I know what's in it. I've read the Constitution of California. I know what's in that too. This is 6,500 words. The Constitution of the state of California is about 110,000 words. 110,000 words. You have to be crazy to try to read that. It is the most horrible document you've ever read in your life. In fact, E. Dodson Wilson, who's the state parliamentarian for about the last 40 years, said that the California Constitution is everything a Constitution ought not to be. In his book, he said the California Constitution was the joke of the legal world because the California Constitution, aside from the Declaration of Rights, and that's the first thing in the California Constitution, the first 3 words are Declaration of Rights, passed beside the preamble. And beside that Declaration of Rights, there are all kinds of things in that document that bind you, not government. And it covers everything from school busing, probably how to set your watch is in there. But what got us into this trouble was a court case, a series of court cases in the 60s. And those court cases caused every state in the United States, except for 11 of them, and I was just rereading one of the cases before I came up here, it caused every state in the Union, besides 11 of them, to have to essentially throw away their constitutions. Because the court decreed, courts don't have the power to do this, Article 3 of the United States Constitution says the United States Supreme Court has jurisdiction in all matters of justice and equity under the Constitution. It has no power to change the contract that created it. And John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison both agreed with that. And they helped write the Constitution. They were there, meeting of the minds. So the court decided that all but 11 constitutions of states, and some of those states had been in existence since before the Constitution was even written, were invalid. And the way they elected state officers was invalid. And that all state officers, and we'll start with the Baker case, the federal government gave itself the power to intervene in state elections. Can you imagine that? Here you are, the states, and the states wrote this document, right? The states and the people in the states. We created government, like Terry said. We wrote this book. And an entity created by the contract now takes it upon itself to tell you, as the author, that your Constitution is no good. And that you must elect state officials according to the whim of the court. And that whim, by the way, is not outlined in this document. There is nothing in this that talks about voting. And in fact, in the Reynolds case, the dissenting justice said the 14th Amendment doesn't give or deny the right to vote to anyone. It deals with civil rights only. We have a document now where the court has said, we don't care about this. and your state constitution is invalid. And we, this federal court, will intervene in those elections anytime we want. Then we get to the Gray versus Sanders case in 1962. And they voted that you cannot have a county block system of voting. See, people are worried in the state of Jefferson because we want a state senator for each county. And we want counties to have at least one state assembly person each. And people are saying, well, what about one man, one vote? Well, we still have one man, one vote, just like you do for any other election. The difference is you don't vote for New Hampshire's United States Senator, you vote for your own. Now, New Hampshire has a lot fewer people than we do. So why do they get to have 2 United States senators? Why does California, with 40 million people, only get to have 2 United States senators? That's called the Grand Compromise, or the Connecticut Compromise. That was decided by the founders so that the people themselves, the body of the people, would be represented in the House of Representatives, and geography, states, communities, would be represented, state governments actually, is how the Constitution was originally written. State legislatures chose United States senators, not people. But even after that horrible amendment that altered the Constitution by the amendment process, though we can't complain about it, even after that, we only get to vote for the senator in our state, even though we have more people than the other states. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Well, that's what they're saying about the idea of Jefferson. However, so as we go on, once the states had lost the ability to have elections by county, then the Reynolds case, because Justice Warren, who by the way was a governor of California, and he was also what Eisenhower called the worst damn fool mistake he ever made, became Supreme Court Justice, the guy changed somewhat. And he said that in the Reynolds case, he said that all elections in states will be conducted by apportionment schemes supervised by this court. And that was the end of state sovereignty forever. Because the Reynolds court decided that states are not sovereign in their election processes, that the federal government has oversight in that. And guess what? Nobody did a thing. Now Warren hung his hat on the 14th Amendment. He says the 14th Amendment guarantees people these things that I've outlined in this 90-page indictment of Constitution. But the 14th Amendment wasn't ratified fully until 1959. In fact, the state of Oregon ratified the 14th Amendment, and then they backed out of it later. California didn't ratify until 1959. Yet we had approximately 1 state senator for every county from 1926 until 1964. And in fact, California had more than 1 state senator per county in 1879. So we're capped now by Constitution at 120 representatives in California. We have 40 senators and 80 assembly people. That's all we ever get. Now under the Reynolds scheme, your vote becomes less and less worthwhile as decades go by. If we had 400,000 people in 1879 and your vote was worth 1, now we have 40 million people and your vote's worth 0.001. We in Northern California have 1 state senator shared between 11 counties. Los Angeles County has 11 state senators. In fact, actually they have 15 if you count the ones that share a county beside Los Angeles County. So we have a situation now where our vote becomes worth less and worth less. That's a funny word, worth less or worthless. And we have to decide how that's going to play out. So we started down this road of morality versus government. And this morality, we would be in serious trouble if it weren't for Constitution. Because Constitution, in Constitutional Republic, grants us rights that cannot be taken by the majority. In other words, the trick to Constitutional Republic is the minority never gives way when it comes to the inalienable rights. In other words, the rights outlined in your Bill of Rights. This isn't the Bill of Rights, by the way. No one created this so that you'd have these rights. This is your Bill of Rights. You already had the rights when you walked in the room. You had the rights the moment you were born. They're what William Blackstone calls the absolute rights. William Blackstone was a famous lawyer read by all the founding fathers. That was our primary law book until the 20s in the progressive era when Woodrow Wilson and his friends got a little bit scared of liberty. And that's when this started. Woodrow Wilson. He was a peace candidate that had to find a way to get the United States into World War I. And he allied with some international bankers. In fact, there was a place called Jekyll Island where on Christmas Eve, one of the international bankers wrote the Federal Reserve Act for Woodrow Wilson. And at that point, it was, I owe, it's off to work I go. How can I pay you back? I know we've got to get ourselves into World War I because that creates a lot of money. So Wilson had a problem. He had to go against his principles and against the principles that got him elected. And here's how he did it. He hired a fellow named Edward Bernays. Bernays was an ad guy. He was an advertising executive. And Edward Bernays hated the term propaganda. He hated that. He thought it just sounded bad. So he came up with a new phrase. It was called public relations. And Edward Bernays used public relations. In fact, his groups, they called the 4-Minute Men. They went to towns and villages all over America, and they stood in the town square for 4 minutes, and they talked Americans into thinking that World War I was a good idea. And away we went. After Wilson, we come through a chain of events that lead us to Franklin Roosevelt. He created the New Deal. The New Deal, think about that. What was the old deal? This was the old deal. The New Deal meant that government can be everything to everyone, and it can cure all the ills of the world and give you everything you think you want and think you need. But remember this, government creates nothing. Government produces nothing. Government cannot give someone something unless it has taken that thing from someone else. That's how government works. So in Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, we came to expect things. The Constitution doesn't say anything about Social Security. It is your money. And I don't want to see you lose it any more than I want to lose mine because they've been stealing it from me all my life. And had they not misused the money, there'd probably still be plenty there. I don't know about that. But the point is, the Constitution doesn't guarantee you equal things. It never did. It guarantees you the opportunity to succeed or to fail on your own merit. So you can take this document and you can be anything you want to be anytime you want to be it, provided you do some simple things and work hard and get maybe a little bit lucky. So now we come to Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson simply took the New Deal versus the Old Deal, and he called it the Great Society. And in that Great Society, it reinforced our thought that government should give us everything we need. And it should be our mother, our father, and tell us how to breathe and what kind of baby carriage we have and what kind of tailpipe goes on our car and all those other things. And that formed what I like to refer to as a grand consensus, where once you have this stuff, you expect the stuff to continue unabated forever and ever and ever. And guess what? That's not how it's going to happen. And that's not how it works. Because we reach that tipping point where government can no longer manufacture something from nothing. And when they continue to try, money becomes worth less. And finally, it becomes worthless. And we're at that point in California right now. So we must renew our faith in Constitution, and we must find a way to get back to that place. In other words, to do a reboot. That's what we're talking about in Jefferson. All of these organisms grow and they bloat. All companies do this all the time. And every once in a while, a company like IBM will have an implosion. They'll get rid of all kinds of people, they restructure their entire business, and they start over with new purpose, leaner and meaner. And that's what we're talking about in the state of Jefferson. We're talking about a do-over, and we can do it. How? We have the jurisdiction, number one. First, we start with jurisdiction. What is our jurisdiction to change the government of California and withdraw from the state of California to form a new government? Number one, we the people. We the people created government. Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution says people have all political power. All political power is vested in the people. Government was formed for their good. And it is their right to alter or reform government anytime the public good demands it. Jurisdiction. What right do we have under this rule book to alter government? Government was formed by the people, and we have the right to alter or abolish it anytime we see fit. Anytime. We don't have to wait for an election cycle. So we have federal jurisdiction, and we have in the Declaration of Independence, and by the way, that is our founding document, isn't it? I mean, we had a Constitution before Constitution, so the Constitution is not our founding document. The Declaration of Independence is. And what does that say? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal. We were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And whenever government fails in that responsibility, it is our right to alter or abolish it. And that's what we're going to do. So the Constitution, this rule book, gives us another roadmap to do what we're doing. Article 4, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, the founders must have foreseen the need, and so they created a way for new states to be formed from the territory of existing states. And it's been done 4 times in our history. Vermont, Maine from Massachusetts, and Kentucky and Tennessee, I believe. So these states were all formed from the existing territory of other states. It's legal, moral, ethical, and it's been done before. We're not even creating something new. We're just doing this again. Once we use that jurisdiction, we will create a state of Jefferson. Now, we have asked every legislator in the building, every single one, time and time and time and time and time and time again, to help us change government so that it represents the people. The silence is deafening. We have not gotten a response from any of them. Any of them. We have a program that I'm going to ask you to participate in where we are making thousands of phone calls a day to Sacramento. Thank you. Thousands of phone calls a day, and we are asking them to help us restore liberty. Nothing. It can't be done. You know, I don't know. I'll have to take a look at it. Send me some stuff and I'll get back to you, and they never do. I mean, you know, okay, I'll tell the senator about it. Because we don't really have representative government here. We have government by staff. California has the worst representative ratio in the United States of America. 1 million people per state senator, 500,000 people per state assembly person. That's not representation. We have come to the point where we truly do have government by staff. You never talk to the legislator. Steve's got a great story about that. He tried to set up a meeting with Ted Hu, and Ted's secretary said, well, you know, he's so busy he couldn't meet with you for 4 or 5 months, and Steve tried to get a FOIA request, and oddly enough, the state doesn't have to release a legislator's calendar. That's privileged information. In other words, you, who pay his salary, do not have the right to know what your employee is doing during his job, during his workday. You do not have the right to know where he is and what he's up to during his workday. It's a secret. At least it's a secret from you. So we're using our jurisdiction and our sovereignty, our jurisdiction to create a state, and that state will have sovereignty. California's Enabling Act, in fact, every enabling act since before 1849 has the statement that new states admitted to the Union enjoy equal sovereignty with the original 13. The original 13, that's big. That's a very important statement in law. How much BLM land is in Vermont? New York? Virginia? Maryland? Delaware? I could go on, but you get the point. So how much BLM land will be located in the state of Jefferson? 0. Because we will exercise our sovereignty. And that land will be returned to the state for beneficial use. And typically of the federal government, when the federal government owns an acre, they lose 67 cents an acre every year. When states use the same land, they earn 16 or 17 cents an acre for that same land. States are more efficient with their own ground. We have a vested interest to be more responsible. We have a vested interest to be more productive. We have a vested interest to take better care of the land that the federal government does. And we will join, as Jefferson, will join the American Lands Council, that effort's being led by the state of Utah, and they have demanded the return of state lands from the federal government. Demanded it. And they're preparing a lawsuit right now, which as the state of Jefferson, we would join in, certainly. We use that sovereignty to protect ourselves. And how do we protect ourselves? Our state interposes. Interposition again. Our state was created and will be created in order to stand between us and encroachment of our liberty by the federal government. And we're creating ways and processes where that can be done. We hope to have a tax system where our citizens pay their taxes to the state of Jefferson in care of the federal government, so that if the federal government fails to behave, our state's money can never be used against us, because we will have it until they promise to behave. Our counties will collect taxes from their citizens just like they do now, and they will pass on to the state that portion of the dollar that the state needs to live on. They will not give the dollar to the state and have the state use that dollar against you in Shasta County or Tehama County or Siskiyou County. In other words, local decisions will be made locally, and there will be no unfunded mandates. When your county sees the need to spend more money on behavioral health or whatever it happens to be, they will already have that portion of the dollar that belongs to them. And our state can work very handily off probably less than 10 cents on that dollar, because we won't be in charge of administering 5 million programs that you don't want and you don't need. Education is another one. The Common Core will not exist in the state of Jefferson. And by the way, that's nothing new. A lot of states are abandoning Common Core because it doesn't serve to educate young people about liberty or Constitution or history or anything else for that matter. Joe Stalin had a real funny quote. He said, "Education is a weapon," he said. And you can tell how effective it is by who wields it and who it's pointed at. So if the state controls the education of your children, and there was a German philosopher in the 1700s that also said that if you give me one generation, I can have your children saying snow is black. And every subject in the world will be perfectly behaved, and their monarch will not need constabulary or army. So education is a very powerful tool, and we must educate our children with liberty. Joe Stalin also said that guns and ideas are equally dangerous. We don't let our enemies have guns. Why would we let them have ideas? Now, Jerry Brown says, and he said this in Paris at the Global Climate Conference, "I believe in the coercive power of the central state." I believe in the coercive power of the central state. Boy, that doesn't sound like liberty to me. And California will continue to regulate and continue to tax. So if you thought the preamble to the Constitution of the state of California was effective in preserving liberty, let's guess again, and we need to do something different, because we don't have liberty under this model at all. Once we get the state of Jefferson now, we have our representatives, we have our resolution to separate. And what we've done is we've submitted declarations and petitions on behalf of 21 counties, and 5 or 6 deputy sheriffs, supervisors, people like that have also declared. We have personal declarations, and we have gotten no response from California. So in a sense, they've proved our case that we don't have representation. What we're doing now, we have a Supreme Court attorney and we have a federal court attorney. And our Supreme Court attorney says this case must be won, and it can be won. So we're going to sue the state of California for lack of representation and dilution of vote. And we can prove our case. Because originally California had 1 senator for each county. And now we have 11 counties that share a senator. We have 1 county that has 11 senators. And so I explained to the attorney, one of our avenues of attack is this. If you squint and look forward into the decades to come, when urban centers grow faster than rural areas, and that's just the way it works, it isn't good or bad, that you can see a point in time where perhaps as San Diego grows into Los Angeles and Los Angeles merges with San Francisco, can you see a time where perhaps 5 counties will have 115 legislators and 53 counties will have 4? And he said yes, because we have 40 million people. We have 1 senator for each million. 40 senators, we're capped by Constitution. What happens when we have 80 million? What happens when we have 120 million people? Representation must be taken from somewhere to be given to other places, and that will most naturally be to urban areas. And in fact, one of the dissenting justices in the Reynolds case said that if we do this, he said, we will be creating a nation that has an entirely city point of view. And he was right. He declared and he predicted that 15 or 20 large cities in the United States of America will control all politics. And so that was the end of state sovereignty, and it was the end of our liberty. Once we have this lawsuit filed, we will declare that we have no representation and we have a dilution of vote. And we think we can win that case. First, it goes to the federal court for the Western District, and we'll file in Sacramento. But the federal court, and in fact, both of our attorneys agree that the courts are the most corrupt branch of government currently. The most corrupt branch of government are the courts. But they also agree that the Supreme Court is the least corrupt out of all the courts. So here's our plan, and this will work. And there's legal precedence for this. In fact, the Evenwall case of Evenwall versus Texas, or Texas versus Evenwall, was brought to the Supreme Court in exactly this manner. First, we sue in the federal district. The judge in the federal district may not hear a dilution of vote case alone. It's against the law for him to do that. Title 28, Section 14, I think 82 or something. He must go to the chief judge of the Western District and say, I have a voter dilution case, what do you want me to do? The chief judge has no alternative. He must appoint a 3-judge panel. This is crucial. The federal judge has all the power in this case. If the federal judge dismisses our case as frivolous, then we have to go to the Ninth Circuit, and we've got to go through that whole process. But if he finds that our case has merit, and it does, and both of the attorneys agree that it's very easy to prove the merit of the case, then he must complain to the chief judge. The chief judge has to appoint a 3-judge panel. Once he's done that, another section in Title 28 says we have an automatic ticket to the United States Supreme Court. They cannot refuse to hear the case. And I've talked to the Evenwall lawyers. This is exactly how they did it. The Evenwall case, for those of you that don't know, is the Texas case where they want to have the 14th Amendment interpreted as, instead of all people will be considered for representation, it will be all eligible voters, which would shift representation to the rural areas. Now, I need to tell the truth here. One problem we have is our biggest friend on the court just died. Scalia just died. He was the guy who said in a public forum, I'd love to revisit that one man, one vote thing, because he thought Reynolds was an overreach by the court. But he's gone, and that's the way it is. We're still going to win. But what we need to do is we need to wait probably for that 9th justice, because, and it doesn't matter, quite frankly, this isn't a political case. This has nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats. So it doesn't matter whether the new justice is liberal or conservative, because dilution of vote is still dilution of vote. But if we don't have 9, we have 2 ways to lose. A 4-4 tie, we lose. Or we could lose on a straight vote. So that gives us 2 ways to lose. If we wait for that 9th justice, we have to be outvoted to lose. There won't be a tie. So we're increasing the odds by waiting for the 9th justice. Now, our timeline is this. Once we file in federal court, it will only take us about 8 weeks to get to federal court. And this case will be very simple. The pleadings are going to be voluminous, but because we have a lot of statistical analysis and a lot of evidence, and this is what the attorneys love about the case, because they say that all judges have a pocket calculator. And so if you were born in 1880, your vote was worth 1, and if you were born in 1990, your vote was worth 0.001. That's easy. If your county had 1 senator in 1964, and your county has 1/10 of a senator in 2016, that's an easy calculation for any judge to make. And we also have some case law that help us here. The Brown versus Thompson case in 1982, Niobrara County, Wyoming, had a state senator. And after their redistricting, which we're commanded to do every 10 years by Reynolds versus Sims, after their redistricting, Niobrara County was allowed to keep its state representative, even though the population ratio was very skewed. They only had 3,000 people in their county. And so the League of Women Voters sued because it wasn't representation by 1 man, 1 vote to them. It was allowing a small county to keep a legislator. And they lost. And the Supreme Court found, and the majority justice said, it is easier to oppress the people of this state or of any other when a county lacks a representative than it is when each county has at least one state representative. So there you go. That's the barn door we can drive the tank through. Once we win our case, and also a case called Saylor versus Tulare Water in Southern California found that votes can represent acreage when it serves a greater state political interest and it's not done prejudicially. So provided we're not prejudiced in the way we allocate representatives to favor one county over another, we can do these things because it will serve a greater state political purpose. Now remember, all but 11 states allowed elections to be conducted in exactly this way prior to 1964. Was Earl Warren the first Chief Justice in 150 years that looked at the Constitution and said, no, they didn't mean at all what they said in here when they said each state can have 2 senators no matter how small or how big? Or was he the only one to get it right once the 14th Amendment was passed or ratified? Was he? I mean, there were 39 states that had 1 senator per county both before and after the 14th Amendment. Was he just the first guy to notice that? We don't think so. And we don't think the current court will think so either. And so we have a very, very good chance of winning. Here's the rub. A Supreme Court case cost $1 million. That's just the fact, and quite frankly, for liberty, that's cheap, folks. You know what that is in the state of Jefferson? That's about $1.10 each. It's about $1.10 each to regain liberty. And if you add in the publicity and the printing and all the sales work that we have to do to the Southern Californians to help them understand why we're doing this, then maybe make it $1.50 each. I would spend $1.50 every day for the rest of my life and the rest of my child's life to regain liberty for my posterity. So that's not cheap. That's not too much money. We have a couple of programs that we're going through that we'd like to ask you who don't participate to participate in. Because here's the deal, your freedom was a gift to you. You didn't pay for it. It was paid for in the Declaration of Independence in the last paragraph. It was paid for with the lives, the treasure, and the sacred honor of your forefathers. It does have a price though, eternal vigilance, right? And you also have an obligation. This is your one duty as a citizen. You have one job, one. Just one. Secure liberty for your posterity. We were handed this country in a certain condition, and I am including myself in this, and we have absolutely failed to maintain that condition for our posterity, for our children, our grandchildren. We have failed them. We have not secured their liberty, but we're going to get another chance, and that's with this case. We need some things. We need to fill the political bucket, as the attorney says, because when we walk into court, court is drama, court's theater, everybody in there is an actor. Half the people in there are liars. And all the lawyers agree with that. They laugh at themselves. But here's what we need. We need to come to the table with so much political weight that we cannot be denied. And the way to do that is for each and every person within earshot of my voice and beyond to make at least 5 lousy phone calls to the California State Senate or the California Assembly or a combination of both each and every day. On our website, soj51.net, it has a button called 51sters. You click on that button. Please give us your name and email address. We don't use those for anything except as a metric to see how many people are calling. That tells us, and we don't really know how many calls you're making, that just tells us that someone was interested enough to fill that in. They're probably making their calls. And when you click on submit, a list of names and numbers will come up. Those are the names and numbers you should call that day. It takes a few minutes. If I had my phone on me, I'd make a call right now just to show you. And so you call that legislator, there's even a little script, and it says, please support the state of Jefferson, basically. Thank you very much. And if you feel passionate enough, talk to them about it. Say, we don't have representation, we're getting hosed off here, our economy is devastated, our children are leaving, our businesses are closing, you can't get a job here. Now that the state has mandated a $15 an hour minimum wage, my children won't be able to get jobs either because nobody's going to pay anybody 15 bucks an hour to take out the trash can. So we need your help to regain representation and regain our liberty. Just say that. Say whatever you feel passionate about, but say something. And if you do that each and every day, you can do it after hours, you can do it on weekends, fill up their mailboxes. We have several days that Brian Dowley goes into his office, his mailbox is full. One of the ladies from Siskiyou County sent him the signature statements of 900 people in a fax. He walked into his office on Monday morning, his fax machine was empty, and there were 900 signature statements laying on his floor. And do you know what his response was? Nothing. Nothing. Is that representation? Can't you even be bothered to say, gee, folks, thanks, but no thanks? We need that, and we need contributions. These cases aren't cheap. We'd like you to help us. We'd like you to go to your friends, go to local businesses. If everybody in Jefferson would give a Jefferson $2, just pledge a Jefferson for Jefferson, we'd have the money to win this case. And we have other things that are coming up. We have other ways of raising money, but this is mandatory. If we don't raise the money, we are not going to win, and that would be a shame. What we hope to do in Jefferson is start over. That's what we want to do. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But we want to start over. We want to reboot. We want to form a government that represents the people and represents your right to liberty and property. We want to do that with at least one or multiples of one. In other words, equal representation in our state Senate. Every county will have equal representation, big and small. And we want to do that so that no county will have less than one representative in our assembly. Each and every county will have at least one, but it will be at a ratio of 1 for 10,000 or 1 for 20,000 based on constitutional convention. One of the problems in California today is it's almost impossible to get rid of an incumbent because it costs too much money. Who has the millions of dollars to spread his message over 11 counties? I mean, I feel sorry for Steve because he's doing his best, and it's just a money hole. But what if you had one assembly person for every 10,000 people? You know how much a campaign cost in New Hampshire? About $1,000. They have one assembly person for every 3,700 people. The guy pays his filing fee, fills his car with gas, and he goes and knocks on each and every door. And if he doesn't do a good job, it's very easy to get rid of him. The next guy pays $1,000 and goes and knocks on the same doors. Or you give him a hard time when you see him in the hardware store, and you will, because he represents you and your neighborhood. Now, a lot of people would say that's balkanization, bull. Representation works best with smaller districts where you can look your legislator in the eye. It does not create division, it creates unity. And here's a proposal I have for the state of Jefferson. In our legislature, we will have a website. Every bill proposed in the state of Jefferson will be posted on that website for at least 30 days, and no more amendments will be allowed for that 30 days, none. Once the bill hits the website, it's done. You can read it and know what you think about it. Now, your senator and assembly person will also have a website, and he will have all of the legislation he thinks you need to know about. Now that's by design. If he doesn't think you need to know about the important stuff, and you find out about it on the state website, you know you need to get rid of that guy. And you'll be allowed to vote on that legislation, yes or no. Now it's representative government. He doesn't have to follow your advice, but he has to archive the vote. So what if it comes around to election time and you realize that 10 out of 14 times this guy that you elected didn't vote with the people, he voted in his own interest? Well, you know it's time to get rid of him. Those are some of the things we can do in Jefferson. In a part-time legislature, we can use a lot of technology so that the people will leave the window open so that they can look through it and see whether government's doing a good job. You know, the Romans knew one thing. Marcus Cicero, who was a big fan of liberty, participated in this. They knew that if they threw bread from the top row and silver coins down into the Colosseum while all the people were watching the lions eat the Christians, that people would be entertained, they'd be fed, and they'd have a couple bucks in their pocket, and they would not worry about what government was doing. And it worked right until the fall of Rome. It almost succeeded until they ran out of money and other people's money and ran out of bread. And that's what we want to stop. We want to make government interesting enough that that window will never close again. I'm asking you to think for the next 50 or 100 generations. I'm asking you to help construct a government that represents the people, the rights of the individual, the rights of property, and a government which you will help supervise. And you will help keep honest, because if that window closes, all we'll be doing is swapping one master for another, and nobody wants that. Well, so we'll create this government with a part-time legislature, far fewer than the 571 state boards and agencies we have now. Because guess what? A state board and agency should not regulate people's behavior. Alex de Tocqueville said in Democracy in America, and by the way, there's nothing new under the sun. These concepts keep coming back, and they come from history. Marcus Cicero knew about liberty. Liberty isn't new. Government overreach isn't new. In fact, Ecclesiastes tells us that what was will be, what has been done will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. You know, we keep talking about we might be condemned to repeat history. That's not true. History repeats itself all the time, because Constitution was never meant to protect us from changing times. It wasn't. William Howard Taft was a president and a chief justice of the Supreme Court, and he said that the Constitution is not a living document, and I can prove it, because it's written in words, and every word can be looked up in the dictionary. So unless the meanings of words are changing, the document can't change. And let's face it, have you ever seen a contract that was metaphoric? I've never, you know, when I go buy a car, the document says you pay $600 a month or whatever it is. Well, I don't go later and lose my job and say, well, you know, this contract is a living document, so I'm only going to pay $320 this month if I can afford it. That's not how this works. So we want to form a constitution that is cast in granite and has an amendment process. It does need to be changeable, but it needs to be very, very, very difficult to change, so that the whims and the causes of the day will not help people to throw away their liberty. Because remember, this is your document. You wrote it. This is to protect you and no one else. Liberty's a little bit selfish. This is about you and your family and your rights and what you want and what you need, not what government wants and needs for you. Because they have no jurisdiction and they have no sovereignty to tell you those things unless you allow them. That's what the state of Jefferson represents, is our ability to get back to the basics of common sense government. I would just like to say in closing, Daniel Webster said, "Hold on to the Constitution with all your strength, for miracles do not tend to cluster. And what happened once in 6,000 years is not likely to happen again." We have a shot at this, and it's a real chance. But this train has been off the track for a very long time, and we are extremely late in waking up to that fact. We're not going to get another chance, I believe, in our lifetime. We may never get another chance to do this. It's been 150 years since anyone's done a state split. I'd like to read you what I believe should be the reason that the people of Jefferson want a constitution. There are times in the history of men when political discourse leads to a separation of two people. We, the people of the state of Jefferson, do not make that separation out of anger, for in the case of anger, we hold none toward any man, woman, race, or creed. We make this separation in the name of representation, the last barrier standing between the people and tyranny. And tyranny, however well-intentioned, is nonetheless repugnant. Our safety, our security concern us not where liberty is at risk. Liberty gives urgent voice to our demand for representation. Representation must reflect our needs, our history, our culture, and our moral imperative. These are the liberties the people of Jefferson hold most dear. The preservation of our natural, inalienable rights compel us to establish the state of Jefferson. We, the people, direct our representatives, now and forever, that the intent and meaning of this Constitution shall always be adjudicated to the protection of the lives, liberty, and property of and for the people of the state of Jefferson. With this state constitution, it is our humble prayer to Almighty God to secure liberty for our posterity. The time has come for 51. Thank you.
Okay, folks, just